The screaming never stopped. For 6 unbearable months, the Kim mansion in Hanamdong had echoed with the non-stop cries of infant twins Ara and Sumin. It wasn't the normal fussing of babies. It was something else, something deeper, something that made even the most experienced nannies pack their bags and flee in the middle of the night. 23 nannies had quit, 23. Some left without explanation. Others whispered about bad energy, cursed children, or something unnatural in the air. One nanny claimed the baby's cries made her chest feel tight, as if invisible hands were squeezing her lungs. Another said she woke up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, convinced something was watching her from the corner of the nursery. Kim Min-seok, the twins' father, barely slept anymore. His eyes were hollow, his hands trembled when he held his coffee cup, and his once sharp mind felt like it was crumbling under the weight of exhaustion and grief. He was a biotech CEO, a man who built empires from science and logic, but none of that mattered now. His wife, Dr. Hana Kim, was gone, dead in a helicopter crash 6 months ago, and his daughters, his precious daughters, were falling apart in ways no doctor could explain. Pediatricians ran tests, neurologists examined brain scans, therapists observed behavior patterns. Every result came back normal. Physically, the twins were healthy, but emotionally they were drowning, and no one could tell Min-seok why. The mansion that once felt warm and alive now felt like a prison. The staff moved through the halls with tense shoulders and tired eyes. Victoria Han, the house manager, tried to maintain order, but even she was reaching her breaking point. She snapped at the cook. She scolded the gardener for leaving tools out. She counted inventory 3 times a day just to feel like she had control over something. And through it all, the twins screamed. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon, Sandra Chukwuma walked through the front door. She arrived quietly, carrying only a small duffel bag. No impressive resume, no glowing references, no explanation for why she had applied for a job that 23 women before her had abandoned. She was young, maybe early 20s, with smooth, dark skin, kind eyes, and a calm presence that seemed almost out of place in the chaos of the Kim household. Victoria looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. Another one, she thought. Another girl who thinks she can handle what trained professionals couldn't. She'll be gone by morning. Min-seok barely glanced at Sandra when Victoria introduced her. He was too tired to care, too broken to hope. If she wanted to try, fine. Let her try, everyone else had failed. What difference would one more person make? But Sandra didn't seem nervous or intimidated. She simply nodded, set her bag down in the small staff room, and asked the question that made Victoria's eyebrows rise in surprise. "May I see the babies now?" Victoria blinked. "Now? Don't you want to rest first? Unpack? Get settled?" Sandra shook her head gently. "I'd like to see them, please." Victoria exchanged a glance with Min-seok, who shrugged weakly. "Fine, follow me." The moment they stepped into the hallway leading to the nursery, the sound hit them like a wall. The twins were screaming. Not crying, screaming. High-pitched, relentless, desperate screams that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. Victoria winced. Min-seok closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging under the weight of it. But Sandra didn't flinch. She didn't cover her ears or hesitate at the door. She simply walked forward, calm and steady, as if the noise didn't affect her at all. Victoria unlocked the nursery door and pushed it open. Inside, the twins were in their cribs, faces red and soaked with tears, tiny fists clenched and thrashing. The room felt heavy, thick with tension and something else that Victoria couldn't name but always felt when she entered this space. Sandra stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Victoria and Min-seok stood in the hallway, watching through the small window in the door. Victoria crossed her arms, waiting for the inevitable moment when Sandra would give up and come back out, overwhelmed and defeated like all the others. But that moment never came. Sandra approached the crib slowly, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She didn't try to pick up the babies right away. Instead, she knelt down between the 2 cribs, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. Then she began to hum. It wasn't a lullaby. It wasn't a song anyone recognized. It was something older, something rhythmic and deep, like a pulse that resonated from somewhere ancient and primal. The sound filled the room, low and steady, wrapping around the screaming like a blanket. Victoria frowned. Min-seok leaned closer to the window, his heart pounding. The twins' screams began to falter. Their cries softened, then stuttered, then faded into confused whimpers. Sandra opened her eyes, reached into the cribs, and lifted both babies gently, one on each side, cradling them against her chest. She kept humming, swaying slowly from side to side, her voice never wavering. And then, impossibly, the twins went silent. Victoria's mouth fell open. Min-seok pressed his hand against the glass, his breath catching in his throat. Sandra whispered something soft and melodic in a language neither of them understood. Her voice was barely audible, but the twins responded. They nestled into her arms, their tiny bodies relaxing, their breathing evening out. Within minutes, both Ara and Sumin were asleep. Deep, peaceful sleep. The kind of sleep they hadn't experienced in half a year. Min-seok felt tears stinging his eyes. He didn't know whether to laugh or sob. Victoria stood frozen, her arms still crossed, her face a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. Sandra continued humming for a few more minutes, then carefully placed the twins back in their cribs. She covered them with soft blankets, touched each of their foreheads gently, and finally turned toward the door. When she stepped out into the hallway, Min-seok was staring at her like she had just walked on water. "How did you do that?" he whispered. Sandra met his eyes, her expression calm and unreadable. "They just needed to feel safe," Victoria scoffed. "Safe? We've tried everything. Doctors, therapists, music, white noise, warmth, cold, every technique in every book. Nothing worked." Sandra didn't argue. She simply nodded. "I understand. But sometimes it's not about techniques. It's about presence." Victoria's jaw tightened. She didn't like this girl. There was something too calm about her, too knowing, too strange. But Min-seok didn't care about Victoria's doubts. For the first time in 6 months, his daughters were sleeping, and that was all that mattered. Over the next few days, the Kim household began to change. The twins stopped crying whenever Sandra was near. They slept longer, ate better, and even began to laugh, soft giggles that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Min-seok started to regain his strength. He slept through the night for the first time since Hana's death. He smiled at breakfast. He held his daughters without feeling like he was failing them. The staff softened toward Sandra. The cook started saving her extra portions at meals. The gardener greeted her warmly in the mornings. Even the younger housekeepers began asking her questions about how she stayed so calm. But Victoria watched Sandra with growing unease. She noticed things, small things, strange things. Every night Sandra performed the same ritual in the nursery. She would hum that deep, rhythmic sound. She would whisper in that unknown language. She would walk in slow circles around the cribs, her hands moving in gentle patterns through the air, as if she were weaving invisible threads. Victoria began spying through the crack in the door, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anger. What is she doing? Is she drugging them? Performing some kind of ritual? Witchcraft? One night, Victoria couldn't take it anymore. She stormed into Sandra's small staff room while Sandra was out and searched through her belongings. She tore through the duffel bag, checked under the mattress, rifled through the drawers. Nothing. No herbs, no powders, no strange symbols or oils or charms. Just clothes, a worn Bible, a small notebook filled with what looked like journal entries in English and Igbo, and a single photograph of a woman who looked like Sandra, smiling warmly at the camera. Victoria felt a flicker of shame, but it was quickly swallowed by frustration. If Sandra wasn't using something, then what was she doing? How was this possible? The next morning, Victoria confronted Min-seok in his study. "Sir, I need to talk to you about Sandra." Min-seok looked up from his laptop, exhaustion still clinging to his features despite the recent improvements. "What about her?" "There's something unnatural about her. The way she calms the twins, it's not normal. I've been watching her at night. She performs rituals, Min-seok. She whispers in strange languages. She walks in circles like she's casting spells." Min-seok rubbed his temples. "Victoria, I don't care if she's dancing with spirits as long as my daughters are finally sleeping." "But sir, enough." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Sandra is helping. That's all I need to know right now." Victoria's face flushed with anger, but she said nothing more. She left the study, her hands clenched into fists, her mind spinning with resentment and fear. But Min-seok couldn't ignore Victoria's words completely. That night, after the twins had fallen asleep, he found Sandra in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal of rice and stew. "Sandra," he said softly, "can we talk?" She turned, her expression open and calm. "Of course, Mr. Kim." He sat down at the kitchen table, gesturing for her to join him. She did, setting her plate aside. "I need to ask you something," Min-seok said carefully. "How are you able to calm my daughters when no one else can?" Sandra was quiet for a moment, her eyes searching his face. Then she spoke, her voice gentle but steady. Your wife, Dr. Hana, contacted me several months before she died. Min-seok's breath caught. What? Sandra nodded. She reached out to me through a mutual friend. She said she needed someone who understood energy, someone who could help her daughters if something ever happened to her. Min-seok's hands trembled. Hana knew she was going to die? I don't know if she knew for certain, Sandra said softly. But she was afraid. She told me her daughters were different. Special. She said they were sensitive to emotions in ways most people aren't. She called it a gift, but she also knew it could become overwhelming if they weren't guided properly. Min-seok felt his chest tighten. Why didn't she tell me? She didn't want to worry you, and I think she wasn't sure you would believe her. She said you were a man of science, and this was something beyond science. Tears welled in Min-seok's eyes. So she sent you. Sandra nodded. She gave me instructions. She told me to wait until the right time, and then to come here and help the twins find balance. She said they would be in pain after she was gone, and that they would need someone who could ground them. Min-seok covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. Hana had known, she had prepared. She had sent someone to protect their daughters even after death. What exactly is wrong with them? He whispered. Sandra leaned forward, her voice calm and patient. They're not sick, Mr. Kim, they're gifted. Ara and Sumin can feel the emotions of people around them. Fear, grief, anger, sadness. It all flows into them like water into a cup. When your wife died, the grief in this house became unbearable for them. They couldn't process it. They couldn't escape it. So they screamed. And you? Min-seok asked, his voice breaking. How do you help them? I can sense emotional energy too, Sandra said simply. Not as strongly as they can, but enough to create a calm space for them. When I hum, when I move in patterns, I'm helping them regulate what they're feeling. I'm giving them stability. Min-seok stared at her, his mind reeling. Everything Victoria had said suddenly made sense in a way he hadn't wanted to accept. Sandra wasn't performing rituals. She was grounding his daughters in a way no doctor or nanny ever could. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for coming. Sandra smiled gently. Your wife loved them very much. She wanted them to be okay. For the first time in 6 months, Min-seok felt a flicker of peace. But that peace was shattered 1 week later. Victoria, still bitter and suspicious, convinced Min-seok to test whether the twins really needed Sandra, or if they had simply adjusted over time. Against his better judgment, he agreed. One night, Sandra was told to stay in her room and not enter the nursery. It was a disaster. Within an hour, the twins began crying. Within 2 hours, the cries turned into screams. By the 3rd hour, the entire household was in chaos. The air in the nursery felt thick and oppressive. Objects on the shelves rattled. The temperature seemed to drop. Staff members backed away from the door, their faces pale with fear. Min-seok rushed to Sandra's room, panic written all over his face. Please, please help them. Sandra didn't hesitate. She ran to the nursery, pushed open the door, and stepped into the storm. The twins were thrashing in their cribs, their faces red and soaked with tears, their screams piercing and desperate. Sandra moved quickly, lifting them both into her arms, holding them close to her chest. She began humming immediately, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The screaming faltered, the air lightened, the oppressive weight lifted. Within minutes, the twins were calm again, their breathing slow and steady, their tiny hands clutching Sandra's shirt. Min-seok stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. Victoria, standing behind him, looked pale and shaken. I'm sorry, Min-seok whispered. I'm so sorry. Sandra didn't respond. She simply held the twins, humming softly, until they fell asleep in her arms. After that night, everything changed. Victoria stopped questioning Sandra. She began treating her with respect, even offering to help with small tasks. Min-seok apologized repeatedly and asked Sandra to stay permanently. The household settled into a new rhythm, one built on understanding and acceptance. Sandra taught Min-seok basic techniques to help calm the twins when she wasn't around. She explained more about Hana's abilities and why she had been so careful to prepare for the worst. And slowly, the twins began to thrive. They smiled, they played. They slept peacefully through the night. One evening, as Sandra stood in the nursery humming softly while Ara and Sumin drifted off to sleep, Min-seok watched from the doorway. He thought about Hana, about her foresight, about the mysterious way she had protected their daughters even after death. She hadn't left them alone. She had sent Sandra to finish the love she couldn't continue. And as the twins' soft breathing filled the room, Min-suk finally understood what his wife had known all along. Love doesn't end with death, it transforms. It finds new ways to protect, to heal, to hold on. And sometimes, it arrives quietly, in the form of a stranger with a gift you never knew you needed. The Kim mansion was no longer a house of chaos and screams. It was a home again, a place where two sensitive souls could finally rest, guided by the woman their mother had chosen long before the world understood why. And in the gentle rhythm of Sandra's humming, Hana's love continued, unbroken and eternal.